I'm Dr. Erica Bove, and welcome to the Love and Science podcast. I'm your host, and also the founder of Love and Science, Thriving Through Infertility. I'm so excited you're here today. With over a decade of experience helping thousands of women just like you, I empower professional women to build their families with confidence and compassion. Let's dive in. Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the Love and Science podcast. I have an amazing guest today. Her name is Dr. Tina Adams. She is a friend, she's a colleague, she's an OBGYN, and she is an amazing human who went through the life coach school like I did and became a certified coach. And so she is both an OBGYN and a certified life coach. She also identifies as a former burnout physician, which I think is really relevant to our conversation today, because she helps women physicians break free from survival mode and reconnect with the possibility, autonomy, and purpose they deserve. Welcome, Dr. Tina. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing I was hoping we would talk about today is sort of what it's like to be a female physician who may be on the verge of burnout, right? We know that at least half of us are clinically burnt out. And then to add, the fertility journey as a layer on top of that. So I wanted to get to that. But in the meantime, I'd love to understand a little bit more about your story and what motivated you to engage in coaching, go to coaching school, and do what you're doing right now, which is sort of this dual taking care of the patients and also serving the women physicians.
Yeah. Okay. So I was the typical OBGYN. So when I came out of residency, I went into an community academic hybrid practice for 5 years, then joined a private practice. And that's where I was for the majority of my career, was in this private practice in Jacksonville, Florida. And I found myself right around 2018, 2019, starting to listen to podcasts. A lot of us got into coaching through finding a coach on a podcast somewhere. And I figured out that a lot of the physicians who were coaches had trained with Brooke Castillo through the life coach school. And so I looked her up and said, let me just go to the horse's mouth. And I ended up doing her self-coaching scholars program for about 6 months. And as luck would have it, I started that in January of 2020,
wow,
the year that everything went crazy. So I was very grateful that I was in the midst of some mindset work when I was dealing with all of the craziness of 2020. And at the time thought maybe I wanted to train to be a coach, but I was still being the rule follower, good girl, following the traditional path. This sounds kooky. Why would I do that? So I talked myself out of it for a while. And then I still felt drawn to coaching. So I got some coaching, was in a group program, ended up going to a retreat with other women physicians with a coach of mine. And I was thinking I was going to try to get into administration in my group. I was thinking I was going to get an MBA and move up into, hopefully, my plan was a chief medical officer role in my large OBGYN group in the state. And I went to that retreat, and I was a blubbering, boohooing hot mess of a human at that retreat. And my coach looked at me when I said I was thinking about getting an MBA, and she kind of gave me what I call the loving side eye, which is what coaches do, and just asked a good question. You're sitting here crying about the fact that you are constantly on meetings after hours and you don't have time to be with your family, and you're going to get an MBA? Just that look. And that it took a while for that to register with me. But then I came home. Well, actually, while I was at that retreat, I got on the phone with my husband in the afternoon, and he said to me, I don't know what's happening there, but you sound more zen than I've ever heard you. And so whatever's going on there, you need more of it.
Oh.
And so I ended up coming home and thinking more about the coaching path and decided that I was going to get coach training. And so I signed up for the life coach school program at that point, and it took me about a year to finish it, 10 or 11 months to finish it. I was doing it when it was more kind of a self-directed program, like you watched modules online, and then you had some coaching sessions with coaches and practice coaching sessions and that sort of thing. So it took me a while to finish it. And then I figured out I wanted to try to build a coaching business, and I was still going full speed in a regular general OBGYN practice, taking call and doing all the things. and that I didn't have any bandwidth in my life to actually coach. So then I started thinking about how I was going to restructure my clinical job so that I could have time to do this. And so I ended up transitioning from my full scope OBGYN practice into an OB hospitalist role. So I'm still full time in my hospitalist job. I work 7 24-hour shifts in a 28-day block.
Mm.
But that still feels like vacation to me sometimes because, I get to come home after work. I get to sleep if I didn't sleep the night before, which usually it's just interrupted naps here and there. So I do come home and take a nap usually. And then I have all these other days during the month to do other things that interest me. And I'm telling you, like my plan was to just do coaching, but then I have also found other things that interest me beyond that. So I've started dipping my toe in the expert witness water, and I get messages all the time from people about consulting or doing interviews or doing surveys or, giving product feedback. And it's just opened up all of these different possibilities. And one of the
Mhm.
things I talk about on my podcast is building what I call a portfolio career where you still stay engaged in clinical medicine, but you do other things that you're interested in. And that's what I love about what this has opened up is it opened up things I didn't even think it was going to open up.
Yeah.
So it's just been an awesome journey. I love coaching people. It's still my favorite part of what I do other than delivering babies. And I don't think that thrill never goes away. I mean, it
Wow.
gets a little bit less exciting over time when you do 3 or 4 in a 24-hour shift, but still a good delivery where dad tears up. I'm just like, ugh,
Aw.
melt. I'm so glad I do this. So
That's right, that's right. And I'm sure you probably also deliver people who have had really long fertility journeys as well, and I think, every delivery is special. I remember that because I did that for 4 years when I was a resident, and I also think that there's something when there is a baby that's born that has been so long awaited and so prayed for and so wanted, and there maybe it's a rainbow baby. There's been lots of miscarriages that happened before. I think that feeling in the room is just there's like a specialness to that. And I think that's what many people who are listening to this podcast are hoping for is like to have somebody like you who can get their baby safely into the world at the end of the journey. And many people are like, is that even going to be me? And so I think it's so beautiful to know that there are people like you who see people through and do that safely, because that's one of the more provoking things we talk about is like after all this, the delivery, and then like, obviously being a parent. But I think it's amazing that you found that joy. And so many varied interests too. I think we think we're like these one trick ponies after a while, and there are so many possibilities. I do have like a tangential question. Are there any things that you found personally that have opened up with this sort of additional time, additional possibility thinking? Are there any like hobbies where you're like, oh, I actually didn't know I was interested in that? Or like that's something we talk about a lot at Love and Science is like we just get so focused on like doctoring and surviving and fertility journey and everything that sometimes we forget that there are things outside of medicine that we might actually find joy in. Is there anything that you found over the last few years that you could speak about?
So I'll tell you the big thing that I remembered that I had sort of given up was just reading a book for fun. I
Yeah.
mean, when you are churning in a full scope OBGYN practice with call and surgeries and, 25 patients a day in the office, like I came home and just needed to sit and stare into space for a little while after I got home, or not make decisions. Like you get home after you have made a million decisions all day long, and then somebody
Yes.
asks you what's for dinner, and I'm just like, don't ask me that. Now I love cooking. Like when I don't have anything competing with it, I cooked dinner last night and it really enjoyed it, and I didn't look at it as a chore.
Yeah.
Reading a book for fun, just downloading something on my Kindle and sitting out by my pool and reading
Yep.
is fabulous. I mean, those are really the big things. It's just remembering that I used to like to do these things before work took away all of the time that I had to do it.
Yep.
And so that has surprised me. And I'll say one more thing. So when I finally made this switch, my oldest had just graduated high school, and my youngest was a junior, finishing up junior year in high school. And I didn't realize that I would miss seeing him come home from school. And when I got to actually be here on the days that he got home from school at 3:15, 3:30 in the afternoon, and he just would come in and sit on the couch and talk to me for 20 minutes, I mean, my 17-year-old boy came in and would talk to me for 20 minutes. And that I started blocking. I did not put coaching calls between 3 and 4:30 so that I would have time to be present
Yeah.
for him when he got home from school. And the ability to do that was just, I was like, how am I living this life where I can actually see my kid and spend time with him and hear about
Yes.
his day and just things that you don't realize you're missing in your life until you get them back.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Tina, and thank you so much for sharing those examples. I think that one thing I help people with, a lot of my female physicians are already burnt out and they're going through the fertility journey. And they're like, how in the world am I going to bring a baby into this mix? How in the world am I going to be a parent in the middle of this like demanding clinical career? And so we start practicing, we start thinking about it. We're like, okay, live your life now as if you have your future self now, and what does that look like? And that may not be, a baby certainly doesn't need a 3 to 4:30 break, but like starting to think about how can I be the parent that I have worked so hard to be? And I think, that's something I've also found through coaching is it really helps you challenge those ideas and that there are so many right ways to do it and you get to choose. And so
Right.
I think we can draw upon that wisdom for people who may not even have children yet, but who want to be good parents, right? And it's not just
Right.
to be parents, but to be good present parents in the middle of this, medical career. And I think it does take learning from other people who are doing that well to start kind of amassing those tools in the toolkit. Beautiful.
Absolutely.
I did want to put in a plug for your podcast, which is called Navigating Possibility. It is an amazing podcast. So, we're all super nerds at the Love and Science, in this Love and Science community. And, I listen to it like on audio as I drive and things like that or fold laundry. But like if I were a medical student taking notes, I would highlight like every single word that you say. Like if I had the transcript in front of me, and I'm not exaggerating, like you just like nod along and I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Like everything you say is so resonant to my experience. And so many of the things we talk about in terms of like processing emotions and what anger represents and burnout and how to like get yourself back again. You talk about so many of those things and also really practical things. Like a lot of my clients or people in my world are like navigating job changes or, moves or other things like that. And a lot of actually what I do is like coach on like career changes and negotiations and things like that, which I didn't anticipate, but that is what's on people's minds. And so please do go check out the podcast, follow it, rate it. Like it's so, so, so good. It's one of the best podcasts I've ever listened to. And you guys know me by now. Like I don't say things that aren't true. Like it is so rich with wisdom and they're not long either. Like they're like, 13 minutes, 17 minutes, like
15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
Like we don't have like
Yeah.
a zillion hours in the day. So they're very high yield and very full of wisdom. So go check out the podcast.
Thank
Okay.
you so much for saying that and
Yeah.
for that shameless plug. I greatly
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about what I was really hoping to talk about today, which is this chronic stress, overwhelm, like state of the nervous system. And when we then throw on top of that what I call the part-time job of infertility, so it's the
Mhm.
getting to the fertility clinic every other day, for at least a couple weeks, figuring out how you're going to communicate with the clinic in the afternoon after your REI's had a chance to review your results. Like make sure that you're getting your progesterone. Like if you're an OBGYN and a stat section's called and you're supposed to give yourself your progesterone at a certain time, what then do you do? Like there's all these like mental pieces that are so hard to juggle alongside career as a female physician. And like at least half of us have what is actual like burnout, overwhelm, the nervous system being completely dysregulated. So like, can you share a little bit how you see the overwhelmed, burnt out brain and then what your thoughts are about how to like add one more layer and do well when it feels like maybe the whole system can't handle one more straw?
Yeah. I mean, I think the overwhelmed, burnt out brain is very much functioning from a reduced prefrontal cortex capacity. I mean, if you think about your executive center, right? Your prefrontal cortex, when your brain is flooded with all of the stress hormones and all of the, catecholamines and you're not operating from your highest brain level, right? So you you're operating from a place where you literally feel in your body like you're being chased by a tiger. And and unfortunately, the medical system makes a lot of us feel that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're constantly dealing with some crisis. We're constantly dealing with interruptions at work when we're already behind. We go into the room after our first patient of the day, and for every patient from then on, we feel the need to apologize for being late. And as people who are rule followers at heart and who are people pleasers at heart, to constantly feel like someone is angry with you really feels like a threat.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to live in that state and try to do all the things that we have to do just as physicians on a day to day basis is hard. But then to layer on top of that, what you just said, the part-time job of infertility of I can't even imagine how as a physician without really learning some boundary setting tools that you say I have to go to this doctor's appointment at this time and it's not negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
And so learning how to speak up for yourself when you don't feel like you should be speaking up for yourself because medicine trains us not to do that, right? We shouldn't have needs. We shouldn't have to go to the bathroom. We shouldn't have to eat. Like we shouldn't have to sleep. That's how medicine trains us to be. And the reality of that is that's just not a way for someone to be human.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to figure out, and what I love about what you're doing with coaching is working on the mindset piece of that equation and getting you to realize that you have agency to speak up for yourself and that it is not unreasonable to ask for basic human needs and that it is not unreasonable to ask that I have a medical issue and I have to go get it dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
And figuring out how to pregame those conversations with your clients and how to say, how am I going to be able to do this for a month or 2 months or 3 months or however many months it takes to have success, right? How am I going to be able to stand up for myself and do what
Mm-hmm.
I have to do in order to achieve a pregnancy with all this extra work that it's going to take to achieve a pregnancy? And so it's really hard to do that without support.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you need is someone who can give you that support like you're doing with your coaching groups and help you figure out how to make the changes that you need to make. And what I love about, I know you have a group program, having all these other people in community who are in the same boat as you so that you can hear what they've done and use that to
Mm-hmm.
adjust your strategy. I mean, I think it's a great service to people who really need it. I mean, we all delay our fertility to get through medical school and training and then we don't realize that there's going to be a problem until there's a problem, and then you're like, "Oh
Mm-hmm.
crap, what am I going to do now?" So, it's having that psychological support, the mental health support, but from somebody who completely understands the medical journey. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's just a great combination and a great service that you're offering.
No, thank you. And I think you're right. Like finding our voices is one of the most powerful things we can do. And so many of us have not learned how to do that. Like we are so people pleasers. I still struggle with this. I get coached on it regularly because I don't like disappointing other people fundamentally. But I think at some point we realize, we're either going to disappoint somebody else or we're going to disappoint ourselves. And, that
Right.
becomes like this chronic, you have a great line in one of your podcasts, like at some point, it's like at some point accommodation like becomes self-abandonment, like something you say something like that. Like at some point we are abandoning ourselves when we aren't putting ourselves first. And one of the mantras we use all the time at Love and Science, I love mantras, is because it's a thought that leads to a feeling that leads to an action and results, right? It's the coaching model is I deserve to be a patient. I deserve to be a patient. And so
Yeah.
many of us don't feel, we're like, oh, I can't do that because I'd have to cancel a clinic, or I can't do that because I'd have to reschedule. I mean, a lot of the hard part about the fertility journey is a lot of it is unpredictable appointments. And, you might have your whole IVF, calendar laid out, and then your period doesn't come. And then your whole thing is shifted by a week, and then your OR schedule, and then this and that. Or, another thing people ask is like, do I do a modified natural frozen embryo transfer cycle, which is like letrozole or, gonadotropins or following the body's natural cycle, which, that happens. You ovulate when you do.
Yeah,
It's not like you can predict that.
absolutely.
Versus doing more medicated cycle, which is more controlled. There's pluses and minuses to both, but I think many people feel quote unquote pressured into this medicated cycle because they're like, oh, it's just so much easier. I start with a date and work backwards. And if that's what somebody truly wants, then I fully support them in that choice. However, I don't want anybody to ever feel like bullied into doing something because they're like, oh, but that's going to be inconvenient. Well, like, guess what else is inconvenient? Like 2 more years of fertility treatment. Like that's also really inconvenient. So, I mean, I know that sounds dramatic, but I think we have to learn to find our own voice, and we have to learn to sit with that discomfort. It's not just this is what I need, but it's like tolerating the disappointment of the people on the other side. It's not just like
Right.
setting the boundary. That's the hard part. It's like actually holding the boundary that I think is really challenging.
Hello, my loves. I am so excited to share this news with you. If you are a female physician navigating the fertility journey and you want a structured, evidence-based plan, I have created a free resource for you. It's called the Physician Fertility Roadmap. I have created a guide to help you optimize your chances of pregnancy and a successful outcome over the next 6 to 12 months. Check out the link in the show notes. Love you. Bye.
And, that's work that also then carries forward because the majority of your clients do end up with success, right? And so to then realize that, what else is inconvenient? Having a baby who gets sick and who you have to go home and leave your job to go take care. I mean, and so learning all of those skills while you're on the fertility journey has downstream benefits that will translate when you do have success and you actually have to adjust to the life of raising a child, which is also has some unpredictability and inconvenience.
Yeah.
So all of this is skill building that will help not only in just fertility journey and childbearing, but just in fashioning your career to be something that you can sustain for a long time.
That's right. No, thank you so much for broadening that to like the general life skills beyond the fertility journey. I think that's so powerful. I want to talk a little bit about your podcast on anger. And that is a very nuanced view. So we talk a lot at Love and Science about anger. Anger is, I think, a very tricky emotion for a lot of us women because it's sort of seen as like unacceptable but we have it, right? We have it. And like, I would love for you to speak a little bit about like what that looks like, perhaps why you think a fertility journey would be so infuriating, and I'm happy to chime in. And then like, what do we do with the anger? Because I 100% believe in mindset work. I also think that if we don't pair that with the emotional regulation, with the feeling our feelings, with that nervous system calming down, like that parasympathetic, like that's where a lot of this work is. And I know from knowing you, I know from listening to your podcast that you have done that work. And so if you could share a little bit about your perspective on feelings, nervous system regulation, how that spills over into fertility journey, I'd love your perspective on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, anger, I look at anger as your body trying to tell you something. Like if you're feeling angry, there's a reason you're feeling angry. And it's because in some way you don't feel safe. Like and it's a protective mechanism, right? It's your body and your brain trying to say something's wrong here and you need to pay attention to it.
Yep.
And I think a lot of us are socialized, as you mentioned, particularly as women in medicine, to be good girls and people pleasers and go along. And so that anger just stews and ferments and just builds up inside of us. And if we don't figure out how to process that, and everybody has their ways of processing things, right? So I'm sure you talk in your coaching about these tools all the time, but actually naming an emotion helps to decrease the intensity of it. It's metacognition, and there are functional MRI studies that demonstrate that naming an emotion decreases its intensity, which decreases its power over your thought processes. And so, one of the things that I try to encourage people to do is to journal. And I know that some people make faces at me when I say journal, but that, because how am I going to find 10 minutes to sit down and write? Well, do you think that might be a problem in and of itself if you don't have 10 minutes to sit down and write about what you're thinking and feeling? And so, figuring out how to name the emotion, right? And then name the thought that's creating the emotion and really challenge yourself. Is that really a true thought? Or is that just the story that I'm telling myself? And do I like that story? Do I like the emotion it's creating in me? And if not, what might be a bridge to alter that? It's all the thought model. And so I think, having that anger also, it's like we talked about all the stress hormones, all the catecholamines, which we know affect the HPA axis, affect its functionality, affect just stress and inflammation in your body. all of which plays a part in the fertility journey, right?
Mhm.
So part of this whole process is figuring out how to, number one, be okay with anger, let it be there for a bit. Don't try to just squash it away or rationalize it away or say, I really shouldn't be angry about that. No, I'm angry about that. That's my body protecting me. That's my
Mhm.
body and brain saying something's not right here. And then you have to sit and examine that, process it through whatever your processing tool is, exercise, screaming into a pillow, taking a plastic bat and hitting something, singing at the top of your lungs in the car on the way home, whatever your processing tool is for processing emotion, do it.
Mhm.
Um, and then realize the thought that triggered it and say, do I want to think that thought? And when you're aware of the thought, then you can interrupt that loop and you can say, well, that was what I used to think, but now maybe this could be true.
Mhm.
And so I think that's just a big, emotional regulation is such a huge issue for all of us, for all burnout and for all of the things, but also for your clients for the fertility journey in terms of just decreasing that sort of amped up stress response and the inflammation in your body that is counterproductive to what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense. And, one thing I want to echo is that, like, we observe, we don't judge. Like, if we notice that we feel anger in our body, we notice it. We say, okay, this is a messenger. Like, what is this trying to teach us? In your podcast, you talk a little bit about what anger actually looks like. And it could look like you say, like a patient's roomed late. Or for me, it's like when I get double booked, I can't explain why that is such a big trigger. I think it means that I have like no control and no autonomy in my schedule. It's getting better now with like the work that I'm doing, but like that to me, when I see two patients at the same time in my schedule, I'm like, ah, it could look like what else? Like, your coder, messages you to like clarify something about the diagnosis so that the insurance can pay for it. Or it's just like one more thing, one more thing. And then you add on top of that, like the fertility journey. So it's like, okay, the nurse, calls you back and your estrogen's only like 57 and you really hope to be like over 200 by now. So that's angering. It's angering that the period hasn't come. It's angering that the embryos haven't been shipped yet, when you've done everything on your end to like make this happen because you're reestablishing with a new clinic. It's angering that, you get a bill that you didn't expect and like nobody's talking to anybody. The financial person's not talking to the admin people who are not talking to the clinical team. And so then you're kind of like the person in this triangulation trying to sort things out and, in your quote unquote free time, which you don't actually have. And so I
Right.
think, or like, another thing that happens frequently. I mean, there's so many reasons that anger comes up on the journey. I mean, yeah, clearly like a negative pregnancy test, and that's both sad and angry at the same time, right? That's like anger is often the presenting emotion, and then there's more vulnerable emotions behind. But like a lot of tests expire and people don't know about that. So it's like, oh, I got my FDA infectious disease testing done, but like these journeys aren't just like weeks or months, oftentimes they're years. And so, oh shoot, your syphilis is expired. You need to like wait a month until we can get that done. And it's like all these hurry up and wait delays that I think really, really, really mess with the, like, I'm just trying to move this forward. Like, what can you say about that? Because I feel like there's so many things that are out of the control of people on the
Yeah.
fertility journey, and also people who work in medicine who are like, this should be better. Like, this is such a complex system, but
Right.
this should be better. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, the system is a hot mess and we're all impacted by it. And particularly people going through a fertility journey are impacted by it on both ends, right?
Yep.
And nobody has ill intent. Like, I don't think anybody goes into medicine to say, I'm going to mess with somebody's IVF cycle by not doing this thing that no, nobody goes into work thinking you're going to mess up somebody's cycle, right? So just the realization and the reality is that we're all struggling in the same broken system. And but that doesn't mean that it's bad for you to be mad about it. Like, it's okay to be angry about it. It's okay that you're upset that the embryos didn't ship because somebody didn't fill out some piece of paper, or that, somebody just noticed that this test is expired and that you have to wait to get it redone. Like, it's okay to be mad about that. Like, just allow yourself to be angry about it. When you allow an emotion, then it moves through you pretty quick. When you stew over it and you continue to just churn that anger and you don't let it move through you, process it and move on, then it lingers there and it just is counterproductive to everything that you're trying to do.
If you're listening right now and finding yourself nodding along, this is usually the moment people realize that they want support that's specific to them. In addition to this podcast, I offer one-on-one fertility consults where we look at your full picture with both strategy and compassion. You can learn more in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, no, I think, and the problem is that nobody teaches us how to feel an emotion. I mean, I think we both learned in coaching
Correct.
school how to do that. It's not rocket science, but I mean, I don't know about you, Tina. Like I had, and sometimes still do have some resistance to this. Like I joke that I'd rather clean a toilet than feel my feelings sometimes. I'm like, this is me as a coach. Like I know it's the pathway to me feeling better, but I don't know. There's like, what's behind door number 3, you know? Sometimes it's a little bit, you just kind of want to brush it aside and compartmentalize. I don't know about you. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. No, there's no emotion that's going to kill you. I mean,
Yep.
really, there is no emotion that's going to kill you, right? We do hard things in medicine. We can sit for 15 minutes and be present with anger. Like it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
It's not gonna kill you. Even
Yeah.
horrible, one of the things we learn in coaching, right, is that even these horrible things that happen to people and the tremendous grief that happens when, say, someone close to you dies suddenly, when people process that, they cry, they sob, and it lasts what, 20-30 minutes, I think was what we were taught in coach training.
Hmm.
Like the crying goes away. Not that the emotion is completely resolved, because it's not. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
losing someone close to you, that grief is a process that you work through, but
Yeah.
the immediate feeling of it doesn't last forever, and it doesn't kill you. So
Yeah.
it's just, you have to just be okay with the fact that your body is going to feel this feeling, and give yourself the space to feel it and let it move through you.
That's exactly right. And ultimately, we'll have like less control than if we like resist it or avoid it or any of those things. And that's where I think the self-compassion piece comes in too, is to say like anybody in my situation would be feeling angry. Grief. I'm so glad you mentioned grief. Like I have not met a single person on the fertility journey who has not had some element of grief, because there's there's disappointing news, there's miscarriages, there's unsuccessful cycles, there's all these things that compound. And then what happens is that when we've gotten bad news, then our brains sort of try to protect us and say, oh, we're only going to get bad news from here on out. And so it's a lot of like that, like, you talk all the time about possibility. Like this is about that possibility thinking. How can we get that psychological safety to say, it is actually possible that this next transfer might follow a different script. It is actually possible that, I might get pregnant with this next IUI, whatever it is. We have to remind ourselves that history doesn't always need to repeat ourselves. And when we are processing the emotions, when we are making sure the science is sound, when we are making sure that we can feel confident in that plan, I think that that's when we really start to see the transformations and people finally turning the corner and graduating from their REIs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
Agree completely.
Okay, so let's pivot a little bit. When I first met you, it was November. I kind of like knew you online, but like I didn't really
Right.
like know
Same.
you, like in IRL, as they say in real life. But you spoke at the Physician Coaching Summit in Arizona on advocacy and what you've done in the OBGYN space to really affect policy, affect laws, and that you've actually spent a significant amount of your time when you weren't taking care of the patients and coaching, in Florida, right? Florida, but
In
also like
Florida.
on a broader scale,
Yep.
to organize and help doctors find their voices, to have conversations with the people who make these decisions, who that then ultimately then affect the patients, in real time. And so I would love for you to share a little bit about what you've done in Florida. You had a quote about how, like, something about how, like, when doctors don't think they have their voice, they don't have a voice, or like the easiest way to keep somebody from finding their voice is to like pretend that they don't have one or something like that.
Yeah. It's a quote from Alice Walker that I use all the time, that the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so that really relates to, so one of the things that I've gotten involved in is I'm an ACOG, now district executive committee member in Florida, and have taken years, about 10 years to move up to that, and have gone to, ACOG has a conference every year called the Congressional Leadership Conference. It happens in Washington, D.C. It's kind of the big OBGYN fly-in where 600 to 800 of us go, and there's a company that makes appointments with us, with our legislators, and we have a big, meeting about what we're going to ask for, and then we go ask for those things. And part of that journey, again, is just feeling like it's okay to step up and ask for what you need. I mean, we've talked about this in multiple different occasions, but this is not just with your employer or with your
Mhm.
family or with your colleagues. This is with legislators, and feeling like you have some sense of agency in changing the things about medicine or medical care that you don't like. And that's also mindset work, right? I mean, all of this it all sort of loops back and ties back together, but
Mhm.
advocacy in particular can feel very intimidating. So when you go to Washington D.C. and the thought of making an appointment with your senator to ask for what you want, I mean, the beauty of going with this big national fly-in process is that those appointments are made for you, and someone who's done it before is there with you to show you the ropes and to teach you where you're going and to help you get through the tunnels in the buildings in DC and between the legislative offices, and to figure out, how to do an ask and how to make it about the patient, and how to not how to craft a narrative that speaks to the person and influences them in the way that you want. And so that's one of the things that I have been involved in with ACOG over the course of the last several years. I'm also on the state legislative committee in Florida, so we talk about state issues, and we have a lobbyist who goes to Tallahassee and asks for what we want, and we kind of help figure out the direction that person needs to go. Obviously, we trust their guidance because it's what they do, but we help to figure out how we're going to ask for the things that we want from our state legislators. I've also called and made appointments at my local congressman and at my local congressman's office or my local state representative's office and talked to them about issues. So, and I don't think I ever would have had the gumption to do that if I hadn't gone to the big national ACOG meeting where they taught me how to do it. And so I feel like, but that's a skill that any of us can learn in whatever
Mhm.
field we're in. And they work for us. Like, I think one of the things that they tell us at these meetings is that these people work for you.
Mhm.
You should ask for what you want. Sometimes it's going to be received differently. Sometimes you're not going to feel like it's received at all. But speaking up and asking for what you want is just a part of the process of being an involved citizen of the country. And
Mhm.
for specifically for your clients, we talk about legislative advocacy related to the fertility journey and related to insurance payment for fertility needs and those sorts of things. Absolutely, we should be building coalitions, I think, of physicians and patients to go and tell those stories and to go and ask for things to be handled differently from a legislative standpoint, so that trickles down to the insurance companies and then affects care. And so
Mhm.
I feel like, if we think that things are completely out of our control, then they stay completely out of our control. If we think that we have some agency to change them, then eventually it's not fast. Legislative advocacy is a very slow process, but eventually we'll get there.
Yeah.
I think that the mindset of feeling like you have some agency to change the things you don't like
Mhm.
is a skill that is translatable across multiple different areas of life.
Yeah, it's so true, and I think that what you've done is so inspiring, and even for somebody like myself who's not done a ton of advocacy work, it is intimidating. And I have a group of friends in Nebraska who actually, it's like 8 physicians who came together, and the Nebraska Medical Association was basically gonna, like, they took a very neutral stance on the process that even an IUI was going to be a felony. And so what they did was they shared people's stories, and they had a lot of meetings. And at the end of the day, the Nebraska Medical Association actually took a pro-reproductive stance instead of a neutral stance, which really did, in the short term, they said we won the battle, but not the war. So it's like you said, it's the long game. But it was really interesting for me to see in a very fertility specific space people, two of whom are my very good friends, and one person I even trained, to take their power, take their voices. And it was, I mean, they were going to Lincoln, which was far from where they were in Omaha, and they were spending their, because they knew that they could make a difference and believed that they could make a difference, it was really powerful to see. And so, I areas of opportunity that I see for advocacy are, number one, infertility coverage. Right now, we have 25 mandated states, which is really interesting, which means that, some sort of fertility, something has to be covered by insurance. I will say, even in the state of New York, where I practiced for many years, a lot of loopholes, and a lot of the hospitals that are self-insured don't, they get out of the fertility coverage because they're self-insured. And so, it really, and also for the fertility clinics themselves, a lot of the negotiated rates are such that the fertility clinics are losing money on each cycle. And so, I will say that the mandated state idea is really, really good in theory, but I think in practice, there's a lot that needs to be shifted. 15 of those 25 states actually do have protections for, IVF specifically, which is great. But I think, what about if you're, 25 and you have a fertility threatening diagnosis and you don't have a partner, you want to freeze eggs? Like, should that be covered? Absolutely. So, like, how do we get that to be covered? And then, also states are very different politically. And I've run into some very specific stories recently of patients who were unable to get their gestational coverage, gestational care covered, even when they might otherwise, because they didn't meet a heteronormative definition of family building as well. And so I think we have to also look at, when these laws are in place, are they for certain types of families and not others? And that's really important to think about as well. So what do you think in terms of the fertility specific space, things that people can do? And like, if you're listening to this podcast and you're already stretched as a female physician, you're already stretched as, as somebody who's undergoing the fertility process and all those appointments, you had mentioned an app during your talk in November. I'd love if you can share that. Like, what
Yep.
are some low hanging fruit ideas that you can share so that people can, have a voice and maybe even budge the needle forward for their own benefit?
Yeah, so the app that I spoke about at the meeting in November was called Five Calls, and it's basically an app that you plug in your zip code and it tells you who your legislators are and how to contact them. And for certain issues that are hot button at the time, it will have scripts that you can use to actually call their offices and basically make a statement to the person who answers the phone, who is usually somebody who is either in college or fresh out of college and who is just going to type out what you say into a computer program that stores all these calls that people make when they come in. And so that is kind of a very easy way. Like, in fact, I think in the app, you can push a button and it will dial the person's office. So, I mean, it makes it very easy. That said, most of the stuff that you're talking about is probably not necessarily going to be in that app with a script unless there's something that's actively going to be voted on for this issue. So the way I think to handle this, because I have done this, my husband has done this, like I've sat here and just listened to him get on the phone with our congressman and say what he thinks, is just pick up the phone and call. Pick up the phone and call their congressional office. It's very easy to find. If you just search, I need to find my congressman and senator's phone numbers. It's not hard. It's intimidating. And the one thing that I want to just sort of tack onto that, when you said if you're in the middle of all of this and you're stretched, then it's also okay not to do this. Like, if you feel like this is going to hurt your well-being, it's okay to know when you need to step back and say, I can't do this right now. But if you feel motivated to do so, it's not hard to do. You just pick up the phone and call. All of your congressmen and senators usually will have offices that are local to you. And they're easier to get in touch with and to talk to when they're in their local offices rather than in DC when they're scheduled out with meetings every 15 minutes all day. How well we understand that process, right? Every 15 minutes all day. But they're easier to actually have conversations with when they're in their home office because they're not going to be quite as busy there. And so if you can figure out sometime when Congress is not in session in DC to go meet them in their home office, that you may get a little more traction there and you can actually go meet them in person without having to fly to DC. But the easiest way to do it is to just pick up the phone and call their office and just say what you think. Hey, I'm a fertility patient and I'm having issues with this hospital that's self-insured being able to opt out of doing fertility coverage when it's required in the state. I'd like for us to think about that and figure out how we can pass laws that protect those of us who need this care, who can't get it because it's insanely expensive and I can't pay for it. Like, it's just, and you don't have to be fancy or polished. Just say what you think. Like, that's the thing, is people call their offices all the time with all sorts of asks. Like, what you're doing is not unreasonable.
Yeah.
And it just is a way to, you might sometimes feel like you're banging your head against the wall, but at the same time, not saying something's not getting you anywhere either, right? So speak up, ask for what you need.
Yeah. And I will say what you've been able to do in Florida has been absolutely amazing. So thank you for those suggestions. I will also add that Resolve is an organization that is fantastic. And they, not even talking about changing laws, but they have like a toolkit, templates that you can, message your employer about, like actually like write a letter to your employer about fertility coverage or like time off. Like go to just Google Resolve toolkit and see what comes up. Like you may be able to get more out of your institution by looking at that when you have an ask. And it's like, oh, do I need to put this into ChatGPT to generate a letter? No. Resolve has already done the work for you. And so just like look at what they have and see if that can benefit you where you're at in your journey right now. Okay. Dr. Tina, is there anything else you want to share? Obviously, I want our listeners to know where to find you. But as we wrap up, is there anything else you want to impart on our dear listeners who are doing all the things, taking care of all the people, and, hoping that one day that they will be able to become a parent or grow their family?
Yeah, just that it's okay to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to make space to take care of you. And the fact that we as physicians need someone to tell us that like it is amazing that we put ourselves in a position oftentimes where somebody has to tell us that it's okay to take time to do what you need to do to take care of yourself and to be able to have the opportunity to build the family that you want.
Yeah.
And stepping back from what you're doing clinically for a period of time, or cutting your hours, or doing whatever it is that you need to do to make that happen is okay. And that you're not somehow wrong for wanting to take care of yourself in this way. That's the big thing, is the world makes us wrong for wanting to take care of ourselves, and it shouldn't be that way. And so that's the big thing that I would want to impart to people, is it's okay to take care of you.
Amazing. That is so needed. We all need to hear that. And thank you for highlighting that piece. Yes, we deserve to be patients. We deserve that permission. So hear it and run with it. And if there's mind drama, then get some support to work through it for sure. Okay.
Right.
Where can people find you? We'll put all your stuff in the show notes, but just so verbally tell us your website, your podcast.
So my website is ChristinaAdamsMD.com. My podcast is Navigating Possibility. And I'm out there on all the social media things. Christina Adams MD on Facebook, Christina Adams MD 02 on Instagram, because I guess there's some other Christina Adams MD that got there before me. I'm on LinkedIn also. So would love to have you go take a look at my stuff and to follow along. And would love to have you listen to the podcast.
I'm going to put in a plug, like follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. They are just so good. So please go find Dr. Tina. She's amazing. And thank you so much for being a guest today. You have so much to offer, and I'm so grateful I got to collaborate with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And to my loves, you know how much I love you. Until the next time. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Love and Science podcast. I'm so glad you joined us today. If you found this conversation valuable, if you could please rate, review, and share this podcast with your trusted people, it would mean so much to me. If you want more tools to help you navigate the fertility journey, please book a discovery call with me today. The link is in the show notes. Please do not let infertility have the final word. I'm here to take the burden from you so that you can achieve your goal of building your family. In gratitude, this is Dr. Erica Bove. I'm rooting for you always.